it's been a real pleasure for me to engage in even a virtual visit to TIRANÖ, which is, I mean, let's face it, it's a pale shadow of the real thing, and the food isn't nearly as good. But it is really a joy to get a chance to sit down, talk with some old friends. I had the opportunity today to speak with the Prime Minister, to speak with President Meta, to speak with Lulzim Bashës. The embassy organized a really tremendous conversation with judges, lawyers, prosecutors, journalists active on justice reform. And it was really a remarkably talented, committed group of people, and had a very interesting conversation about the pace and scope and direction of the justice reform efforts in Albania. For my part, in my conversations with Prime Minister, President, Mr. Bashës, talked about the upcoming Defender 21 exercises and the value that we saw in deepening and growing the defense and security relationship with Albania as an important NATO partner, NATO ally. We discussed the upcoming elections, the importance that the United States attached to ensuring that the elections were free and transparent and conducted according to the highest democratic standards, that the candidate lists were clean, that those who should not be entrusted with positions of responsibility were not included on the candidate lists, the importance of ensuring confidence on the part of the Albanian public in the results of the elections, so that they can be confident that the results reflect the will of the electorate. The government that emerges is a legitimate expression of the will of the people. I underscored in all of my conversations the extent to which the United States remains committed to being a good and a strong partner for Albania, as well as our gratitude in Albania's willingness to be a good and a strong partner for the United States. We remain committed to a European future and a Euro-Atlantic future for Albania, very much hoping to see an agreement on the part of the European Council in June for the first IGC, the Intergovernmental Conference that will formally launch the negotiations process, the accession negotiations. In order to achieve that goal in June, it's important that Albania continue to make progress on judicial reform, and it's important that the April 25th elections are successful, not in the sense of a victory for a particular party or particular candidate, but successful institutionally, process-wise, and structurally, so that they are seen as fair and transparent and provide an outcome that reflects the will of those who showed up to vote and exercise their democratic rights. Let me stop there, open it up and take some questions, and really looking forward to the conversation that we're about to have. So thank you all for taking some time today. I'm grateful and I appreciate it.
Great, thank you so much, sir. So for everyone's awareness, we have randomly selected your names to pick the order. So I'll read you in order based on the list that I have. Muhammad Valiu, you are first from Top Channel.
Thank you very much, Brian. Mr. Palmer, thank you very much for finding time and talking with us today. In past few months, we have seen Ambassador Kim very active, asking for people with criminal past not to sit in parliament seats, in particular about one individual, current MP, Mr. Tom Doshi, who in 2018 has been designated by State Department. Now, Mr. Palmer, everybody in Albania is asking, what do you know about this individual? What sort of corruption has he been involved? And can you give some explanation for the people who's going to vote? Because Mr. Doshi, for example, in Tirana is #1 in the list, in Shkodra as well. People must know. What can you tell about what sort of corruption he's been involved?
But I don't want to, first of all, thank you very much for the question. I appreciate it and entirely understand where you're coming from. And I don't want to get into the details of particular cases or particular people or particular issues at this point. But I do want to underscore that those that we identify for sanctions under these kinds of authorities, including the sanctions that would prevent them from being able to travel to the United States, we do our research and we make sure that we have the basis of knowledge that we need before making any such determination. I think it's really important, as Ambassador Kim has said loudly and publicly and repeatedly, that the candidates that the Albanian public will have an opportunity to vote for are people that they want to entrust with positions of authority and responsibility. And it's very important, I would argue, for the political parties to do everything that they can to ensure that the lists that they put forward as representative of their parties and representative of their values are full of people that they can support and defend, people that they would want to see in these positions of trust. The lists are far from perfect. There's still a lot of work to do. And I think Ambassador Kim and the embassy have been clear in identifying those areas where we continue to have concerns. I think the Albanian people have a right to expect from the political parties and from the political leadership that they will be given choices, good choices that they can make when they go to the ballot box. And here there's a responsibility on the part of the political class to live up to that obligation and to ensure that when people go to vote and they have candidate lists in front of them, that those lists are people that they could be proud of.
Okay, so next we're going to go to the public broadcaster, Rita Shah, and from there we have Sabina Agostini.
Thank you, Brian. Hello, Mr. Palmer. Hello from TIRANÖ.
Hello.
Thank you for your time. It's very important for us to understand more. Well, I have a question. Did you receive any message from Mr. Meta, Mr. Rama, and Mr. Bashën about the justice reform, that they will continue supporting it the way it is? And did you receive any message from them for the election that this election of April will meet the standards? Thank you.
Thanks for the question. And those are two very important issues, two very important questions. I can tell you for my part that I laid out the expectations on the part of the United States that justice reform efforts would continue, that this was not an issue that was relevant only in an electoral period. Perfection in justice reform is not really the goal. The goal is better. The goal is that today is better than yesterday, tomorrow is better than today. This is something that we all need to continue to work on in our own societies. I include the United States in this, to remain vigilant, to hold political figures to account for their behavior. For those who misuse positions of public trust, there needs to be accountability. And the public should feel that the law is something that is applied fairly and equally, and that we were all of us held to the same standards, and we are all of us equal under the law. That is a goal. It is an aspiration. It's one that we must all of us work towards. We have seen, I think, real progress in Albania on justice reform. But I think everybody, certainly the United States, myself, Ambassador Kim, and on this, I think I can speak for the Prime Minister and the President, as well as for those leaders of opposition parties. I think we, all of us, collectively understand that there is still a great deal of work to do, and that needs to be a priority for Albania if Albania is to move forward on its European path. In terms of expectations for the 25th, I think that everyone is working towards a process that is as free and fair as it can possibly be. And there will be, a lot of bare-knuckled politicking along the way, and that's a normal part of democratic politics. But what really matters, and certainly the position that I've articulated and made clear, is that the institutions of democratic governance are strong and seen as legitimate by the publics, and that the processes are transparent and accountable and produce outcomes that reflect the will of the public through a democratic process.
Okay, next we're going to move to News 24, and from there we have Marcela Caraponte. Marcela, I think
Marcela, you're up.
Still Still muted.
Okay. Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Mr. Palmer. Albania is having a tense electoral campaign. In fact, President Ilir Meta said some days before in News 24 that whoever touched the vote, their hand will be cut off. While the Defender Europe 21 military exercise will be developed in Albania one day after the election, is there any connection between these two issues from the election and the military exercise here in Albania?
No connection whatsoever. You know, the only thing that I would say about the military exercises is that it reflects and underscores the value that the United States places on our relationships with our NATO allies and partners, not just Albania, but it's, you know, Defender 21 is bigger than Albania. We're doing exercises, engagements with numerous NATO partners and allies across the region. And I think it really offers an opportunity for Albania to shine as a NATO ally, as a very strategically located country. But it's not in any way, I think, connected to the elections on the 25th of April. We've certainly been paying attention to some of the sharp rhetoric that has been part of the political campaign. But, you know, the truth is that the only places where political campaigns are without heat and without edge are places like North Korea or Chinese, the communist China, where, you know, people aren't really presented with a legitimate choice. So, you know, democratic politics has passion that's associated with it. That's not only normal, I think it's actually healthy.
Let me just add on the issue of Defender 21. The dates for that exercise were set well before the date for the election was announced by President Meta. And these things, once again, as Matt said, it depends on the schedules of all the countries that are involved.
Right, and these exercises are planned long in advance. Here, Ambassador Kim's absolutely right.
Okay. So next, we're going to move to ABC News, and from there we have Esiona Konomi. Esiona, go ahead.
Thank you. Mr. Palmer, in this election, Prime Minister Edi Rama is based mostly on the vaccination process, but in this process are using mostly or huge doses from China or Russia too. Is this a geopolitical concern for the USA? Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, the United States is committed to ensuring that there is access to vaccines around the world. We have elected to do this principally and primarily through the multilateral mechanisms, COVAX, Gavi. This is the vehicle through which the United States is putting our financial resources in play, and we've contributed to so far $2 billion, and we have another $2 billion in the pipeline, so a total of a $4 billion commitment to this effort. It's beginning to pay off. You're seeing vaccines arriving not just in Albania and the Western Balkans under COVAX, Gavi, but really around the world through that effort. I think the Chinese and the Russians in particular have chosen to play some kind of vaccine diplomacy where they use these access to vaccines as some kind of political instrument. I frankly find that to be somewhat suspect. I do think that every country needs to do the best that it can to ensure that it is taking care of the public health of its citizens. And that means taking a good hard look at what vaccines are available and accessible, looking at the data, making a decision as a nation state, as a government, whether the data supports approving a particular vaccine or not. There's going to be some differences of view of that depending on the standards that are employed. And then within that framework of ensuring maximum public health benefits for their citizens, making decisions about what vaccines to approve, how to acquire those vaccines, whether to work through intermediaries or directly with the companies, through COVAX and Gavi, or through some other vehicle, and do everything that the government can to provide sufficient vaccines to flatten the curve and control the pandemic. We're all of us doing that. The United States is doing it. European countries are doing it. Countries in the Western Balkans are doing it. Albania is doing it. This is, I think, a normal thing. The appropriate mix of vaccines, that's really something for the Albanian government, for the competent authorities in TIRANÖ to make a determination on. The United States is there in partnership with Albania and the whole world, and our principal vehicle is COVAX.
Okay, so next we're going to go to Report TV, Klesiana Omeri.
I need you to unmute, Ms. Omeri.
Brian, Klesiana is from Klan.
My apologies. We're Go ahead, Klesiana. Klesiana, you're still on, your microphone's still on mute.
If you could write your question down and hold it up to the camera.
Okay, oh, there we go. I think.
Ah, perfect. I think you're on. Yes, excellent.
Mr. Palmer, thank you for this conversation. We appreciate this. I wanted to ask you if United States will ask for verification of the suspected candidates even after the election. Will the persecution against them continue even they are elected as deputies? Thank you.
Yeah. You know, we have expectations not just of candidates for office, but we have expectations for those who hold office. So if what you're asking me is, will the United States insist that our partners in government are people who are clean and who are operating in a manner that is consistent with democratic norms and democratic standards? The answer to that is absolutely. And we think it's very important that the judicial institutions, as they move forward in Albania through the reform process, demonstrate that they are an adequate vehicle for ensuring accountability on the part of those who have power. You know, it's not just the courts. I look at the SPOC being stood up and beginning to do its job and beginning to do its job effectively and laying down markers. There is a message that is being put forward that those who have positions of public trust and misuse and abuse those positions will be held to account for that.
Thank you.
Okay, now we're going to go to A2 CNN, Marita Haklai. Marita, your microphone is muted.
You know,
we can hear you.
We've all of us been doing this for more than a year now, and it's still hard.
I thought that Brian could up my voice. Mr. Palmer, thank you for the opportunity. I have many questions, but the opportunity is for one. The United States of America, through its ambassador to TIRANÖ, is loudly acknowledge our main problem of our elections here in our country, including vote buying, vote pressure, influence of crime and corruption in politics. And this strong assertion of Ambassador Kim is emphasized for months. This appeal was made these months by Ambassador Kim, who is constantly calling for the parliament with integrity on 25 April elections. Do you felt on these meetings today that pressure of our ambassador, American ambassador in TIRANÖ, is going to work this time? Let me to add in this that the Constitutional Court has become operational, functional, but has not yet addressed the fundamental issues that have become part of the strong political conflict in the country. One of these is validity of the 2019 elections. And you were very, very active that time, Mr. Palmer.
Yes, I was.
How do you see this time?
Yeah, it's an excellent question. Do I feel that the leadership in Tirana is hearing our message? Absolutely. Yeah. Ambassador Kim is many things, but she is never anything other than clear. And that, I think, is an important value when we're communicating on issues that are as important as justice reform, as accountability. The United States, I think, has an obligation, a responsibility to Albania to be clear and unambiguous in our messaging on this. We have every expectation of holding Albania to a high standard. It's not a standard, frankly, that I think the country will meet tomorrow or the day after tomorrow. What we would like to see is an Albania that is ready to take its place as a member of the European Union. And there are 80,000 pages of rules that go into the acquis, and a requirement to demonstrate that there is a strong track record on transparency and on holding those who behave in a manner that is corrupt to account. That's one of the fundamental values of the European Union. It's one of the fundamental values of the transatlantic alliance. Anti-corruption is a core value, not just for the EU, but it's a core value for NATO. It's a core value for the United States. It's something central to our partnership with Albania. Progress has been made. There is a hell of a lot more to do. And what we want to see is significant figures, people of influence, people who have in the past had an expectation that they would be protected, need to see them held to account. There need to be prosecutions. There need to be convictions. Those who are convicted need to serve their sentence. This is what accountability looks like. And things are moving in the right direction. I think the trend lines are broadly positive, but we're impatient. And I believe the Albanian people are impatient. And we would like to see progress in this area accelerated and examples made.
Thank you.
Great. And now we're going to move to Euronews. And from there, we have Artie Hoja.
Do I hear?
We got you, Mr. Hoja.
Thank you. In fact, I had many questions, but since we have to make only one question, I'm asking you, Mr. Palmer, considering the changes made to the electoral code over the past year, but also the large-scale implementation of technology, what kind of elections does the US expect from Albania on April 25th? Do you see the premise that they are really qualitative step for Albania in making the electoral process?
I don't want to prejudge what's going to happen on the 25th. We take our cues, frankly, from the OSCE ODIHR mission that set the gold standard for these kinds of election observations. And I look forward to the report that the OSCE ODIHR team will produce. The report that they produced from the last elections guided in many ways our efforts to support electoral reform in advance of these elections. And I think there was agreement reached in Parliament on some pretty important, pretty far-reaching electoral reforms. I have every reason to believe that if those reforms are implemented and acted upon, that these elections will be a step forward, a step in the right direction. And that's really what we're after. We're after positive progress. We're after not perfect, but after better, and a sense that things are continuing to move forward on the reform front in a manner that will be reassuring for the Albanian public, such that they know when they go and cast their vote, that vote will be counted, that it will be counted fairly alongside the votes of hundreds of thousands of others who are casting their vote, and that the outcome, what is produced in the form of a parliament, elected leadership, will reflect the aggregate of those votes. There are certainly challenges along the way that are not about the vote counting process, but are about the media environment and the conditions. That's something that OSCE ODIHR also addresses in an area where we also want to see progress and reform. Positive media environment, equal access to the instruments that allow parties to get their voice heard.
Thank you.
Okay, next we're going to move over to Suri TV. From there we have Claudia Caraboli. Claudia, go ahead.
Claudia, can you hear us? We cannot hear you. Blink twice if you can hear me.
It's so ridiculous.
Well, you know, I am not going to miss Zoom. I want to get back on an airplane and come see y'all.
Claudia, we're gonna, I've asked you to unmute in the system, but if it's not going, so I'm gonna move to the next one and you can maybe try to toggle your microphone on or off. So next we're gonna switch over to Vision Plus, and there we have Thimi Samarjiu. Thimi, go ahead.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Ms. Ambassador Kim, and thank you, Mr. Palmer. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, it's perfect. Thanks, God. Mr. Palmer, I listened to you carefully, and you mentioned a word, North Korea, which is used a lot from our president. And you mentioned also the juridical reform. But looking, and you're involved in 2019 election. Looking back at the time, I find many Facebook tweets or comments from the president who declared that you had the side. So after 2 years, how is your relation with the president? Are they normal? And how you see the involvement of the president in this election? Because the president should be up of all the party, but we can see day by day that he is not on the top of the side. So he's let's say involved in this campaign, and he's just asking the change will come after 25 April. How you see this involvement of the president and how this can affect all the situation on this election? Thank you.
I mean, for my part, the relationship with President Meta is excellent. He and I have known each other for a lot of years. We've had many conversations. We speak to each other very openly and frankly and candidly, which I think is the way that allies and partners should speak to each other. The United States, me personally, we don't have a side. Our side is Albania. It's the US-Albania relationship. We work well and closely with the current government. We will work well and closely with whatever government emerges out of the elections on April 25th. I am confident that whichever party is victorious on the 25th of April, whoever the prime minister is after the 25th of April, will someone who values the partnership with the United States. I mean, I think I'll leave it there. We don't take sides in anybody's politics.
Okay, with that, we're now going to move over to Aura News. Ertila Dosti, go ahead. Ertila, if you're able to unmute.
You can do this as charades. Ah, perfect.
Okay. Hello, Mr. Palmer. Albania seems to be backtracking in different reports regarding media freedom. The European Council has criticized the anti-defamation law, while an independent court decided that Albania owes 110 million euros to the Italian businessman Francesco Becchetti for shutting down his TV channel back in 2015. Do you think that these records demonstrate the poor media freedom? Thank you.
I think there's absolutely work to do on media freedom, not just in Albania, but across the Western Balkans. Our vision for the region is a region that is on its way towards integration with European institutions, and including, in particular, the European Union. That's going to require considerable effort in the area of media freedom. And I think there's a lot of work to do in Albania, but I don't think that is a unique challenge. I think it's one that's broadly shared across the Balkan region.
Can I just add a clarifying note just to prevent any misunderstanding? What Deputy Assistant Secretary Palmer said is in reference to media freedom and media environment overall. It's not a comment on the case that you raised.
Yes, I'm not commenting on the particular case, but just broadly speaking, with respect to media freedom. I think there's a great deal of work still to do, and that will need to be progress will need to be made in order for Albania to advance on its European path.
Okay, now we're gonna actually move over to Report TV. I'll offer my apologies to them. And Arsen Rusta, go ahead, Arsen.
It's okay, you heard?
Yes, we're good.
Thank you, Mr. Palmer. I have two questions, but included in one. After 2 years, are
very
the
clever.
Of, okay, after 2 years, are the results of SPAC what you accept and people of Albania accept on this election? Are the last chance of us to the destination of European Union?
All right. I think SPAC is making progress, and I don't have an objective yardstick against which we are measuring progress over time, but the goal is to work with SPAC as partners to help them build the capacity to be able to act in a manner that is conducive to good governance, transparency, and in the case of SPAC, accountability, which is really kind of what it's aimed at. In terms of kind of the second aspect of the question, I'm sorry, remind me kind of the second part of this. Can you rephrase that for me?
Okay, the democracy in this election is the last chance of us, like people of Albania, to for our destination in European Union?
I think it's very important that the April 25th elections are conducted in a manner that is demonstrative of positive forward progress on democratic reforms and electoral reforms, one that makes the European Council comfortable in June with green lighting the first IGC for Albania, which is something that we think Albania has earned and something that we'd very much like to see acted upon.
Thank you.
Okay, and now I think that the microphone is working. We're going to move back to Suri TV. Claudia, go ahead.
I think can you hear me now?
I can. I can't see you, but I can hear you.
Okay. Thank you for this opportunity to talk with you, Mr. Palmer. Thank you, and excuse me for the little incident. So I have a question. The US is talking about the observation in every polling stations, but the election and before the voting, with the votes being voted, the citizens' houses before April 25. This is the deformation that has appeared even in wiretaps. As you know, this disrupts the process more than any violation. How will the observers detect it?
Claudia, I think we lost your audio right in the middle of your question. If we can try to.
Do you have any way to?
I'm not sure what you've asked me, but I'm going to say yes. No, I'm. I lost the chain on that. Can you give me kind of a little nutshell of it? I think you're back on mute.
Claudia, if you could repeat again where you said this disrupts the process.
Okay, the US is talking about the observation in every polling station, but the vote buying process is happening before the date of election, April 25. So how will the observers will detect the problems and the vote buying?
Yeah, I don't want to speak on behalf of the OSCE, but I know that this is, again, a problem, a challenge that is not in any way unique to Albania. So something that I very much anticipate and expect those experts from the OSCE who are charged with monitoring electoral conditions, providing reports and recommendations on reforms that are necessary in order to strengthen the system. I'm confident that this is something that they're going to be tracking closely as well.
Thank you.
Okay, and with that, we have reached the end of our time. I want to thank all of you for joining us and for your questions. We will get the transcripts, the video of this session for you all as soon as possible this evening.
Thanks very much for taking the time today. And those were excellent questions. You may only have gotten one, but they were really good. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Faleminderit, mirupafshim.
Thank you.